I have 8 messages to listen to. Baruch Hashem, it's Hashem.
Your brother answered in the morning, called him like 9 o'clock in the morning.
He was about to come, then he said no.
No, but usually he's probably sleeping in the morning. He woke up.
No, he works. He's working out of his house. He works on the computer.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
I don't know what time he gets up, but he works.
If you're not here, it's not the same. We need you to give us boosts.
Baruch atah L'chem Shekelni V'dvari.
It was nice
Okay.
yesterday for bringing.
Oh yeah, Baruch Hashem, thank you for the seltzer. Who fabricated? Those are beautiful. Beautiful. And Mirosov is koching Hilchos Brachos. He's very involved in Hilchos Brachos. He's writing and publishing. Okay, so Rabbi say, I want to discuss Sif Yotes. We're holding page Kuf Yotes. Page Kuf Yotes. Sif Yotes. Kuf Yotes Yotes. So let's recap a little what we learned last week. These very complex halachas of Shehiyah v'Chazara. Shehiyah, before we go to Shehiyah v'Chazara, there's another siman of Bishul on Shabbos, cooking on Shabbos. Cooking on Shabbos is an isim in HaTorah, right? And there are some of which are asim d'Rabbanan. For example, Kli Rishon, asim in HaTorah. Kli Sheni, asim d'Rabbanan. That is even if the Kli Rishon is off the fire, it's a problem. A hot condition. So all these things are even off the fire. You're not allowed to do it on Shabbos because it's an Issa Bishul, either min HaTorah or Midrabanan. However, even if you're talking about a food that there is no Issa Bishul because it's 100% cooked, there are still various Isurei D'Rabbanan that Chazal put when leaving a pot in the fire at a Shabbos, which is called Shehiyah, being Masha, leaving a Kedei in the fire at a Shabbos, and as well as Chazara, returning a pot that you took off on Shabbos to the fire. On Shabbos. So Shehiyah is at a Shabbos, leaving on the stove or inside the oven at a Shabbos on the fire, into Shabbos. Chazara is on Shabbos, I took something off, I want to return it back. So Chachamim said, although min HaTorah, there's no problem with either one of these actions. Shehiyah, there's no problem, even if it's not cooked, because it's for Erev Shabbos you're doing it. No issue to do something Erev Shabbos. Just because your pot is cooking on Shabbos, not a problem. You're resting. You don't have to make sure you have Shvisas Kalim, that your Keli is Shavis. That Beis Shammai held. Beis Shammai held that your Kalim also have to work. Just like Laman, Yenuach, Shorcha, not only your animals have to rest, your Kalim also have to rest, Beis Shammai learned. However, they still argued and said, no, Kalim don't have to rest. Only you have to rest. Not your Kalim. So, min HaTorah, there's no problem. As well, Shabbos, when you want to put something back on the fire, you're talking, if it's fully cooked, it's fully cooked. There's no problem in HaTorah. What's the problem? It's cooked. There's no Issa Bishul. Right? Ein B'shlach HaBishul. It's cooked already. Challah, schnitzel, dry kugel. So however, Chazal came along and said, we are going to put a mishmeres to the Torah, asu mishmeres l'mishmerti, lishmer, not to come to Nisurim and HaTorah, and they made various gedarim and siyagim and takonis and how we put things on the fire Erev Shabbos and how we return things to the pot on Shabbos. Although there is no Isam and HaTorah, there are various Isurei D'Rabbanan. So Erev Shabbos we said, now what was the reason behind Chachamim's takons? Why did they do this? Why did they make these Isurim? So Erev Shabbos was clearly because of the Chashash Shema Yechata B'Gecholim. In order to hurry up your food to get it ready for Shabbos, if it's not cooked, we're worried you're going to stoke the fire instinctively and create a fire on Shabbos or enlarge a fire on Shabbos. That's the Chashash for Shehiyah. So therefore, in order to cover that chashash, Chazal said, there are three ways you can do it, three independent possible ways to leave something in the fire Erev Shabbos. One is use a blech. Number two, you can, even without a blech, you can have the food meichel brandusroi cooked, which means partially cooked, halfway cooked, l'chatchila, v'di'eved, even a third cooked. Erev Shabbos. The third method is taking a raw piece of meat, if you have cholent, which is a fleshige cholent, the meat is raw, and you're putting it in right before Shabbos in a slow cooker, also mutter, there's no chashash shemiyachata. That's when you take raw meat, put it into a slow cooker right before Shabbos, before it had any time to become raw. L'chatchila. L'chatchila. You could do this, either one you could do. Either one, either the blech, or meichel in the say, or if you have a fleshige cholent, or you have a parva cholent and you throw in a piece of raw meat. The Gemara says, Shadibe garmachaya, shaperdam. If you throw in a piece of meat right before Shabbos comes in, you're not going to be mechata because it's anyways not going to be ready for the night meal. And for the morning meal, anyways be ready in the middle of the night. So there's no reason to be mechata b'gecholim. But the Pesach man will explain it's only in a slow cooker these days. Because on regular fires today, we have our good fires and they can cook foods for the night meal.
A lot of people use slow cooker.
A blech? No problem. You don't need the raw piece of meat because you have the blech. Each heter is independent. Now, those are the three ways. In general, the advisable way is just to use a blech because you don't have to worry about how cooked it is, not cooked. Just put on a blech and finished. But if you don't have a blech, or you don't want a blech, no problem. Ma'ichem Desai is perfectly legitimate heter. This is all b'negei shehiyah, which again, there's no ism in Torah, just isurei d'Rabbanan, because maybe we will come to an ism in Torah shemicha. As well, the dinim of chazara on Shabbos is also, there's nothing in Torah problematic. You're putting it back if it's fully cooked. You took off a shell and it's fully cooked, took off a soup and you're putting it back to make it hotter, keep it hot, keep it warm. No problem in Torah. It's fully cooked, the food is still warm, no bishul. Chachamim came along and said, don't do it. Only under certain conditions can you put the pot back on the fire. You can't go take out a soup from your fridge, or let's say a challah, and put it directly on top, or schnitzel, and put it directly on top of the fire. So they required a bunch of conditions, and we'll discuss the reason for the conditions soon. But let's go through the conditions. They said it has to have a blech, number one. Even though shehiyah, we said a blech is optional. You have other options. You can do ma'ichem and desai. When it comes to chazara on Shabbos, you must have a blech. You must use a blech. Now, that's step number one. Now, the reason behind this behind the blech, why do you need a blech on Shabbos? Mela Erev Shabbos, we're concerned you mean mechata b'gecholim, stoke the fire. So the blech is here to remind me not to. But that's when it's not cooked. But if it's meichel desai, there's no chashash Erev Shabbos because we're not concerned. It's already partially cooked, so you're not worried. It's going to be ready for the meal. So on Shabbos, when I can only return it to the fire when it's fully cooked, anyways, because you can't allow it to cook on Shabbos. So what's the worry of Hashem yichat b'gecholim? The food is fully cooked. The Alter Rebbe learns the reason why you need a blech on Shabbos is still because of Hashem yichat. And the shehiyah Erev Shabbos, you didn't need to have a blech. Ma'ichem Desai alone is enough. Shabbos, Chazar and Shabbos is more strict. You need to have a blech because we're more concerned that you're going to play around with the fire. Why? Because when you come, why are you returning the pot to the blech? Why are you putting it back on the fire? Because you want it to be warm? When you come back, you're going to turn the fire higher. Very normal to go turn the fire when you put it back on. Mm-hmm. There's much more of a concern of Shemi Yechata. And therefore, although for Erev Shabbos purposes, for the Dinei Shehiyah, it would be mutter if it's Ma'achad Desai and Kol Shekei now that it's Shabbos and it's fully cooked, it wouldn't be a problem. Chazal said you must have a blech. Alter Rebbe explains the reason is Shemi Yichat. The Mishabura had a different understanding. The Mishabura said no. Mishabura said that the reason why Chazal required a blech on Shabbos is because near a kimavashal, it seems like you're cooking. You're not allowed to do things on Shabbos that seem like you're cooking. So you need to put on a blech. Right, so we understood a different understanding. They're both based on Rishonim, various Rishonim opinions. But the halach is clear, you need to have a blech by Chazara. It's required. You cannot put back anything on the fire without a blech. And a crackbat means lining it with silver. Now, besides for this condition, there are other conditions besides for having a blech. You have to hold on to it with your hand. You have to have a mind to return the pot to the fire. You can't flip the pot to another pot and put that new pot on the fire. What's the reason behind all these last few conditions? The idea behind it is Chazal did not want us getting comfortable putting things on the fire on Shabbos. It's nira kemavashal, it seems like you're cooking. You feel nira kemavashal seems like you're cooking. Right? And this will bring you to become, because you might feel comfortable, I could put it this way, I could put that up, then you'll suddenly start cooking on Shabbos. So Chacham said like this. Chazal said, if it's just, your food is just returning it to the fire, it's b'derech chazara. I held on to it with my hand, I had in mind to put it back, and I didn't put it into another pot. So when I put it back, it doesn't look like I'm doing a new maisa chodesh. It looks like it's just a continuation of what was previously, as if the pot never left the fire. So it's not a new bishul here. I'm not putting it back. It's not nira kimavashal l'chatchila, as if I'm doing this l'chatchila. No, this is just a hemshich. That's what they required, holding on the hands, that no hesachadas, and don't put into another pan, because you put into a new pan, a new pot, it looks like you're doing something new here. That's the reason for these three. Both the Mishabura and the Alter Rebbe masking with this, that these conditions are b'tzanira kimavashal. They only argued about the first condition, that you must have a blech. What's the reason why Chazal required a blech on Shabbos? By Chazar. That the Alter Rebbe learned mitzvah Shemi Yichata, the same chashash as Erev Shabbos. And the Shabura held no, not mitzvah Shemi Yichata, that's also mitzvah nira kimavashal. All the conditions of Chazara, the nira kimavashal.
What did we say last week? How long, when I take it up and I had in mind to bring it back, like how long I should hold it? That it should be accelerated?
Good question. As long as it's still warm.
Warm or accelerated warm?
Warm.
Warm.
Edible warm.
Uh-huh.
If it's still hot enough to be eaten, warm enough to be eaten as a hot food, because people at certain foods, that they're cold enough, they won't eat it. So then you cannot
Return
anymore. It's usually not a problem. I mean, unless you're doing something like a small tiny pot of soup.
No,
usually a hot pot of cholent, the hot soup's going to stay.
Yes, if Chochem took it off, and then someone said, "Oh, what you did, a small kid," and they wanted.
That's different. That's a different question, because you didn't hold on to it.
Right.
That's another. I'm talking about.
And they didn't have in mind to put it back also.
Good, but I'm not talking about that case. So we have to discuss your case. I'm discussing in a case where you had in mind, you're holding on to it.
It's just too long.
Too long. That's a problem. If it cooled off, you're now allowed to put on, even if it's the davar yavish and there's no bishul.
Right.
There's another problem, because it's not considered chazara anymore. The original bishul is lost because it cooled off. So what remnant, what she'edis is there in here? What reishim is there of the original bishul? None. So once it cooled off, putting it back on is a problem.
And to take it off from the fire straight, now allowed to also. Open the cover and take off straight. Also not allowed to.
Move it off. Now, what Shmuel is asking, that what's going to be if by accident you didn't have a mind.
Yeah.
You did not have a mind, or you let go of it, the pot on the counter, you weren't holding it in your hand. What do we do then? That's the big question. So that's what we're going to learn about today in this fixed year, Sifyut Tes. Aval Mucham Ktsas. You know, I'm gonna read. Let's just skip the first paragraph for now. Aval Haminig, second paragraph in the test. Aval Minig lohakel oid. Minig hakal oy, the minig is you make even more. I feel a haxel teich tamim shalanu. That they put the pots back, they return the pots back inside our ovens. Shedinim ketoich which have the same halachic status as inside an oven those days. On machzinin they return it gam la'acha shehesak even after they remove their hand from the pot from their hand. V'nicha gabe karka, and they placed it on the ground. V'shas hasham, and it was left there harbe a long time. V'gam lehoya v'daite la'chila zira, and as well in a case you didn't even have in mind to put it back on. Mafilu pina tafshel deracheres, even if you moved the food, the dish, into a different pot, even if you did everything wrong in the book, almost everything wrong. You didn't hold it, you put it down on the ground, you waited a long time, it's still cooled off now, and you didn't have a mind to put it back, you moved it to another pot, you did all the problematic issues over here. So he says this minig is that they're makel and they still put it back in the fire. If it has a blech on it. Fully cooked and has a blech, they're makel. Ve'ein limches biyadam. Don't protest against those who follow this minig. Why not? It's against halacha. You need to have tanoi chazara, where they don't keep any tanai chazara. All they have is a blech. Explains out the Rebbe lefi sin sheyesh oirim. Since there are those that say it's a famous Ran Beinu Nisim. Shelo yitzrichu chachamim sheyeh daite lachzira v'oide b'yadei el shanat lo behakir b'moed yoyim u'ba lachzira b'Shabbos. When did chachamim require all these conditions? And when you took it off the fire during the day, u'ba lachzira b'Shabbos, and now you want to put it back on the fire on Shabbos. Then she'az, in that case, if you do not have the mind to return it, you remove it from your hand. In such a case, it's as if you're putting it on like a on the fire on Shabbos, which is asur. Since in the beginning of Shabbos, when Shabbos entered, your pot wasn't on the fire at all. That's when Chazal made all these conditions. Ever in a case, you remove the pot when it's dark, when it's already Shabbos. Like we do, we remove the pot from the fire when it's already dark, or the next day on Shabbos. Kiva shebetchilas kisa Shabbos hoya. Tafshel zeh ala kira and in nida k'neshiva Shabbos otfila. Since when Shabbos entered, you had that pot on the fire. Even though now you took it off and you lost all your Tanei Chazara, you could put it back. Because according to the Ran, the conditions of Tanei Chazara were never said about such a case. All these things we learned about until now were only in a situation where you took it off while it was still day, and then you want to return it back at night. Then we say you can only do it with conditions. However, if you left the pot on the fire when Shabbos came in, and now you want to take it off, and put it down, and you're not going to have a mind, and then you're going to want to put it back later on the fire, not a problem. So then, even in the case where you do not have mind to return. Yeah, if it was just with straw heated up, or even if it was not straw, it was with wood, you did have a blech. The tafshel is bashal called sarki, and the tafshel is fully cooked, but instead of the garment, it's not cooled down. He didn't yet say his psak. He just said, don't be moiche. Meaning, let's say this practically speaking. According to the Ran, this is a famous Ran in Perek Kira and Shabbos. If you took your cholent pot off the fire on Shabbos, put it down. You had no mind to put it back. Some guests came. Someone comes and tells you, yeah, one of the family says, your son says, Tati, I'm in shul. I saw my friends. I told them to come over. They're going to be here in a half hour. You're like, oy vey, I took the cholent pot off. It's going to be cooled off. Comes up the Ran, Rabbeinu Nissim, you daven by the Ran in shul. You ask him what the halach is. He says, no problem, put it back on. Aye, Rebbe, I didn't hold on to it. I didn't have in mind. I even took the cholent and I flipped it to a different pot because the bottom of the cholent pot was burned. So I moved into a new pot. Says the Ran, no problem. My psak is put it back on. What's the reason? He says, all these Tanoim that Chazal gave in Gemara, we're only discussing a case when you took it off Erev Shabbos, and I want to put it back on Shabbos. Then you need to hold on to it, have in mind. But if when Shabbos came in, your pot was on the fire, on the blech, you can take it off, and no problem. As long as it's gruf or ktum, which has a blech, and it's still warm. Still warm and it has a blech, you can put it back on the fire. That's what Rabbeinu Nissim says. And Alter Rebbe says, since they have who to rely upon, these minig, you can't be moich on them. All other Rishonim don't say such a heter. They don't bring up such a marvelous heter. They don't say a word about it. But since they have a ran to rely upon, don't be moich on them.
When we start here, Haminhag, it said, להקל עוד אפילו להחזיר תוך התנורים שלנו.
Yeah.
You have to put it inside, not in the top of the blech. It has to be inside the tanur.
We didn't really discuss it, but in those days, one of the conditions of chazara, that you're not, even when you return a pot to the fire, you're not allowed to put it inside the fire, only on top. We don't makbid on that.
We don't have that kind of oven today.
Because we have different type of ovens. Their ovens, the bottom of the stove top and the oven was all feeding off one fire. There was a fire inside.
It's like this. It's like this with a hole, and you put the pot over here. Either you put the fire from here, or you have a door and you put it inside. Right?
You take a door here like this. They have a door, the door, and you could either put the pot on the top, two pots over here, or you put it inside. You want it to get really hot. So one of the Tanoi Chazar is you only allowed to put it on the top, but not inside where it's very hot. Even though it's fully cooked, but it's near the kimavashal. So the Alter Rebbe says that this minig was that they would put it back inside.
Near kimavashal is marit ein.
Yeah.
I think also for yourself. I think
that's
also
why I'm asking. Nobody home, and only
right.
So what marit ein for me?
First of all, it says that kol masha asu chachamim yishamaris ayin. Once they made an usher, usually, not in all cases.
You should not get
used to that.
Not in all cases. Some say that doesn't apply by Dini de Rabbanan. Here it's in the Rabbanan.
So this is the Rabbanan.
Certain cases they do not. Yes, it's Rabbanan. Certain cases they do not apply. It's fully cooked we're talking about. Now,
The last two lines.
yeah.
Just
Now.
Hold on. Yeah,
based on this sheet of the Ran never allowed you to go put it inside the oven. The Ran was talking about on top of the oven. Not inside the oven. But so where does the heter come from that we learned earlier that the minig, when we started reading the paragraph, was the minig lahakal oid to be put it even inside, like you were saying.
Right.
But you're not allowed to put it inside their ovens those days. And the Ran only allowed, you said, you don't need Tanai Chazara, certain Tanai Chazara, if you took it off when Shabbos started already. But he never said you're allowed to put it inside the oven. That condition he didn't say is canceled. He said only that if you didn't hold it in your hand you didn't have in mind, you moved the food to another pot, in those three cases, you could put it back on the fire because, but not, he didn't talk about inside. And he said that all you need is a blech, and it should still be warm. However, the oilam took this ran and they took it a step further. And they're meko v'layim to say she'af ma she'as v'chacham lahasel l'toichel also she'notz mena b'yidoyim. That this whole idea again that the ran, that based on what the ran said, even this isser to put something inside the oven was only in a case when it wasn't on the fire when Erev Shabbos came in, but our cholent and soup is on the fire when Shabbos comes in. All our foods. So there's no problem to put it even the inside they want to tie in there. The Ran didn't say that Mefedish. When we call Makim still in the hall, call Adam the
Favorite.
last
Alex.
Even I told you not to protest on this minig. It doesn't mean it's a good minig for you to adapt. Don't adapt this minig. Every person should be mach for himself. Not to put something back inside the oven. Even though he took it from there. After it gets dark. There's not enough of a reason to differentiate between taking when it's dark to taking when it's still light out to the heter of doing it inside. Basically, the Alter Rebbe is saying this Ran only gave you a kula that 3 Tanai Chazara you don't have to keep if it was on the fire when Shabbos came in. But to put it actually inside the oven, he never said it. And therefore, although I'm telling you don't have to protest on this minig because they're trying to base their minig based on the Ran, they're saying, based on that logic, based on that svara, I should be able to make for this also. That the Alter Rebbe doesn't want to be made. However, he says, to put on top of the fire, we could make ikra to be make a feeling the third line. Even in a case where you're putting it on top of the fire, top of the stove, and which is more lenient, and you didn't have in mind to put it back, and you took it out of your hands, it's better to machmer.
What daf is that?
Daf Kuf Chaf.
Kuf Chaf?
Yes.
In the Rav Shulchan Aruch?
Yes.
Kuf Chaf?
No, Hebrew.
Page Kuf Chaf, the Hebrew. Are you using the Hebrew one?
Oh, no, I've got the bilingual.
So look up Simon 253.
Oh, I'm right on it. 253, fine. Okay, thank you.
253,
With this.
19.
Except for one thing. 253.19,
Yes.
it only has 9 as the highest. 10. As 250.
No. Open up the book and look up 253.
I'm at 253. Oh, 253.
No, not page, chapter.
Yeah. Oh, section 253.
Yeah.
And which sheet?
19.
Oh, that's what you said, right? Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
No problem. So I hope the oilam is clear. This is a famous Ran. The Ran is coming to make a big kula, and and basically the Alter Rebbe is describing that there were in the people then that had a certain minig that they basically would barely keep any of the conditions of Chazara. The only conditions that they would keep were 2 conditions. They would put it back only on a fire that had a blech. In those days it wasn't a blech, they did it differently, but it had a blech and the food was still warm. Then they would put it back, but without their holding on to it, without having in mind, even if they flipped it into a new pot, which is also to do, they would be make. Not only that, they'd be make a 4th thing. They would even be make on something Chazal tell us, Shulchan Aruch says that you're not allowed to, when you do chazara, you can't put it inside the oven, only on top. Even at that, they would say even you can put it inside. So the Ran did not say befedish. He didn't make on that condition. He spoke about the other three conditions. So says the Alter Rebbe, since they have who to rely upon, they're following in the Mahalach of the Ran, they just added another detail to it, and they're saying that based on the Ran's reasoning, even inside should be permissible. The Alter Rebbe says that, I'm telling you, you don't have to protest against this minig, but I'm also telling you, do not do this minig. Because there is no real logic to say, Mela, the Ran came up and said that these three conditions go away. You don't need to keep daiti l'achziroi. You don't need to hold your hand the whole time. And you can flip it to another pan. That I understand. Says the Alter Rebbe. But the Ran never said this extra stretch that this minig is doing so that you're even allowed to put it inside the oven.
Yes, they put it inside.
And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, be machmir not to do that. And even when it's not inside, it's on top, and you're missing all those three conditions, you should just know that most opinions do not hold like the Ran. They say that no, there's no differentiation when you took it off, before Shabbos, after Shabbos. It doesn't make a difference. So, the Alter Rebbe says in that case, toiv lahachmer, not like the Ran. Better to be machmer, not like the Ran.
The Gemara.
So therefore, we keep the conditions of Chazara because we want to keep this toiv lahachmer, not to follow the Ran, because majority of opinions don't follow the Ran.
In other words, it is a case that you have to matir, you have to say.
Yes.
But don't do it.
Don't do a lachatchila, which means like this. What happens? I'll give you an example, a pashut example. In a regular case, it's you and your wife sitting there, and the cholent pot was taken off by accident. You shouldn't be putting it back on the fire. Toiv lahachmer, not to put this back on the fire. But what happens if you have a lot of guests coming? What happens if you're making a Sheva brachas? What happens if your malmo is coming? Then you put it back on. You have the Ran to rely upon. Toiv lahachmer is very nice for yourself, and it's important to do toiv lahachmer. But to do it for other people, and that it should, your wife should be very embarrassed, and it should be a whole situation going on. That's not good. That's not toiv lahachmer, toiv lahakil. In that case, so it should be lenient and put it back on.
The Ran was.
My wife was a young child. She told me she remembered her grandfather. There was a Rav in Australia, and he was visiting, and he was the Abbezin there. And she remembers that Shabbos in the morning, she took off the cholent. She wanted some cholent, and then she was trying to hold on the hand. I mean, she wasn't that young, but she was, and she held her. But then she forgot. She took off her hand, and she realized, oh, and it's in the morning, and her mother's having a meal later, and all the guests and everything coming, and so she just remembers that her grandfather said to her. She was like, "What should I do?" He was up. He was there in the morning when he was there in the kitchen. He said, "Quickly put it back. Quickly put it back." So after I learned the sugi, I said, yeah, that's the Ran. That's the Ran in Perakira. And he was saying, situation warranted it that we're not going to be machmir in this case. We're going to put it back on.
The Ran was before the Gemara or after the Gemara?
We wanted to be Shainim.
One of the Rishonim, so before the Gemara.
After. He was a Sfardi, and he was he lived in the times of the Rambam. And,
The Rambam time.
after the Rambam.
So 800
His
years.
Rebbe, one of his Rebbes was the Ramban. Yeah,
Maimonides.
yes.
Yotzeret was kind of this.
Yeah. So it's important to remember this Ran in cases of a need.
Yes,
However, I will give you an eitzah that will help you to even be machmer, even in such a case, that you can put it back and still keep it warm. The eitzah is like this. So before we get this eitzah, I want to backtrack a little bit. All these conditions of Tanoi Chazar are only necessary when you want to put it back on top of the fire. And even when there's a blech, you still need these conditions. There's many halachas over here. Many pratistic halachas. There must be some deep Saidas HaTorah over here. Many complexity of halachas and all this pratim over here. Now, What happens if I want to put it on the blech next to the fire, but not on the fire? I don't need any conditions. Not a problem. Take your challah out of the freezer, and as long as there's no frost on top, you let the frost evaporate, and you put it next to the fire, you can warm it up. Or you like hot challah, you like toasty challah, not a problem. Or you want to warm something up, a dry item, a dry schnitzel, dry challah, on top of your cholent pot, on top of your soup pot. So you have a kedera in between, separating from the fire. There's no need for conditions. Why not? There's no need for conditions because it's not the derech to be cook over there. All the Tanei Chazar were only when it's near a kimavashal. This is not near a kimavashal. This looks very strange what you're doing. Go ask a guy, he walks to the house, what are you doing? He thinks you're crazy. He doesn't know what you're doing.
This is near Kemachamem, not Kemavash.
If you put silver foil in between, not kedera. Typical schnitzel, it's cold. You have the pot and the oven.
What you could do is,
Put silver foil.
what many poskim say is, instead of having a pot of food, if you don't have a pot of food to put it on top of, take a silver foil pan or a frying pan on top of the blech. Better to do it on top of the blech,
and then
put it on top there. If you don't have a blech, you can't. And it's a tzarich, you could do it even just a flipped over pan. Flipped over pan is a suffix in poskim. Because there's no food inside. Some say it has to be food in there to make the hefsek. Hefsek kedera is with food or without food. So those that some say kedera rekonis is okay, an empty pot in between is okay, and some lean that it's not okay. So it's better. What Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said, and other poskim said, if you have a blech and you take a flipped over pan, a kedera rekonis on top of that, that's very abnormal. That you could consider. So therefore, you could put a bunch of schnitzels on it. Warm up your chalas on it, you need more space. Not a problem.
But it's not direct on the blech, it's on
Exactly. Because all these conditions are all that you shouldn't look like you're cooking. It doesn't look like I'm doing this, and that's not the derech l'bashal.
Right.
It's not the derech. On the side, you're allowed to do. And by the way, even if there is no blech, you can put a challah near a fire. Just you have to move it slightly away from the fire. Just to remind you not to come to touch the fire. When you have a blech, that blech is the reminder. So you could put it on the blech right next to the fire, just not touching, not on top of the fire. So based on that, in a case where you, by accident, let go of your cholent, you were planning on putting it back on, you were going to serve it out, and then serve out somebody put it back on because an hour later you're having more guests. So again, the Ran says, you can put it back on, but the poskim say that Amma, Alter Rebbe, Mishabrura, all the Ashkenazi poskim, Toiv lahachmer, not like the Ran, because all the other Rishonim don't say such a kula. They never brought up such a distinction. They don't agree with the Ran. So the Das Yachid. But it's a Das Yachid that many were noig lahakol like him, a minig lahakol like a Das Yachid. So if you want, therefore Toiv lahachmer not to do it. But if you want to be Yoitzel Chol Adeis, you'll take a flip pan and flip it over there and put your cholent pan on top of the flip pan. And then you're good, even according to the other Rishonim that disagree with that. There's no type of hachmer over here. But you're fine. If you can't do that, that's not going to be enough heat, and there's a chance of toilet because you're having a lot of guests, you'll rely on the rani, you'll put it directly on top of the blech without the frying pan in between.
Once I have a blech and the fire, let's say, is here, but the pot is far away from that.
Again, where?
I have a blech and the
Yeah.
fire is in the corner over here.
Yeah.
It's there for Shabbos and everything. Let's say Shabbos morning. I'm allowed to take it and go now direct to the fire?
No.
Because?
It was cold. It was sitting in a cold spot.
No, but it's the whole blech. It's one big blech.
But it's not hot everywhere in the blech.
So
And under the fence,
how much I could move? Like
how
what's
far
the,
it can move.
where is the
It's questionable. Some say that if it was on the fire when Shabbos came in,
right?
like Moshe holds, it was on fire when Shabbos came in.
Then let's say,
And you want to dish out, you want to take out cholent.
right.
He says you don't need to go and remove it off the fire all the way, and then you have to hold on to it, all the conditions. Rabbi says move it off the fire in a place where it's still hot, leave it there, and just take out the cholent and push it back on. You don't need to hold on to it, he says.
The dietary.
The daita you have anyways, das, you're planning on doing it. But he says, why not? Because he tain is that in this mokim where it's still hot, it's considered as if it's still connected to the fire, and as if it never left the fire. It's not like a new cooking.
But that's why Blech is good. That's why
Moshe allows it,
move it
but
from
he
the
allows
top.
you to do hagasa, to take out from the pot on that spot. That's the chiddush. Chiddush of Moshe is even though that spot is hot enough that it could cook it, but it's not on the fire, you could dish out. And on the other hand, it's still considered connected enough to the fire that you don't need all the conditions and just give it a push back. It was a chiddush of Moshe. A lot of places can hold that. You could follow that. And okay.
That's what we do these days.
I don't know what everyone does in their kitchen. It does
You have a big
different
blech.
things. I don't know.
With a
Because
big pot.
most of the people who have big blech have fire on one place and that's
Right.
it. And then either they will go, push
Because
it
it's
to
not
the
hot
fire.
on the other corner. It's only hot by the fire.
They shift it.
But it's not hot over there at all, then you have a problem to put it back. If it's not, it's cold. It's
So use your mesh, meaning you're not holding on to it,
Moshe hold that if it's originally on the fire,
right? Not with the blood.
with the blech,
The whole blech is warm.
you can
It's
move
not
it,
like the-
shift it away from the fire, take out whatever you want, and push it back on.
That's his case, where it's a big blood and the heat is not on the other end,
It's not on the other end.
right?
And you moved it all the way to the cold end,
Right.
you can't put it back on then.
Why?
It's
the
cold.
second.
No, it's the Moshe only allowed it
Oh,
if
and
it's
it's a hot.
the hot area of the
You're
blech.
mixing the food.
With two flam.
So Moshe
No,
was make this
People don't
chiluk
want to keep two
that
blech, they want to keep one
lagabe
blech.
mixing, it's not on top of the fire, is not a problem. Lagabe chazara, it's still considered connected to the fire, it's still hot. This is his chiluk is
It's
machal.
Yatzalepis, and that's fine.
Not everyone necessarily agrees on that. I see from earlier pasuk that it doesn't seem understood that way. I'm just saying that Moshe held that way, and you have to rely upon. Also, you have to remember you have the Ran. The Ran anyway says that you're allowed to take it off totally off the fire from the can to put it back.
Right.
So the Ran didn't say putting
Number
it.
nine,
So if
number 10. Without any now.
Rabbi Davis, you want to say something?
That's why Blech is good. You can move it away from the fire, leave it on the Blech, take out, and then you put it back onto the fire on the Blech.
That's what we
Right.
You don't
So they
have to
have to
hold
keep
this.
it on. You have to keep it on the blech in the hot part of the blech. Not
Right, right.
if it went to its cold parts of the blech when you only have one or two flames. There are parts that are cold. So
It's not
the
cold.
cold
It's
is just
cold.
the.
It's not cool.
But most of the Blech is warm. Most of the
Oh,
Blech.
okay. If
The
it's
top of it,
Yatza
yeah,
Levis,
the other end, all the way to the other end, it might be cold already.
That's already it's okay.
When a blech, you can't.
So that is very
You
different.
can't touch a blech when there is.
But under the flame is the hardest.
The hottest, right?
Okay, Rabbi says, so tonight we Be'ikr learned the din of the Ran. When I was learning in Koilel, so someone came over, he was a lawyer, he learned in Chaim Berlin when he was younger. He lives on the Upper East Side, and he came over to me and tells me, he's an older fellow, and he says, listen, you're just newly married, I want to let you know, the cholent, if you by accident, the cholent comes off the fire, put it back on the fire. And I looked at him like, what he reform Judaism? Like, we never do that, we hold on to it. And I didn't yet learn the halachas. When I learned the halachas, I said, he meant the Ran in Perekira. That the Ran was makel, that you're allowed to put it back on. You're allowed to put it back on. Okay, the Ramah says Toiv Lahachmir. But I guess in case of need, he was worried there'd be some serious Shalom Bayis issues. So then he go put it back on.
My grandfather used to bring in cornet salak if he's sitting.
Yeah.
When time to bring the chont, he's like, I don't want you to have tires. He took the chont off. When it's not so hot, then he put it today.
Okay, Rabbi Yitzhak, thank you everyone for joining. Rabbi Davis and David.
That's
You got to see the room. You got to see the apartment.
There's a lot of sperm.
Baruch Hashem.
I would love to show you the rest of it, but